Hello, everyone. Welcome to our third practice management event for 2024. I'm Brandon, the founder of Advisor Flow and an independent financial advisor based in Vancouver, British Columbia. Thrilled to have you on today to discuss how effective storytelling in your client conversations can lead to building better connection. Our goal today is to provide you with actionable strategies that you can implement in your practice immediately. Now, what's our agenda today? So I'll provide a brief introduction to our guests. Sam Sivarajan will then run us through the art and science of storytelling. Following that, Duncan will explain how he's used storytelling in his practice and help us understand really the power of storytelling in building client trust. I'll share a little bit about how I crafted my story in my own practice and then how I tell that story digitally. We'll then close things off with a Q&A session, and we encourage everyone to get involved in that. If you enjoyed today's session, we do actually keep the recordings on the Advisor Flow website, advisorflow.ca/webinars. We hosted a variety of topics on niche marketing, book acquisitions, operating multi-advisor practices. Please check them out. And if there's any topics you'd like to see, please let us know, and we'll consider those for future events. Ultimately, at Advisor Flow, we're very committed to the success of our financial advisor community. And we believe that by working together and sharing best practices, we will better serve our clients and run better businesses. So without further ado, I'll briefly introduce our esteemed speakers. Sam Sivarajan was first introduced to me by my good friend Herman Chan. He's an industry thought leader and led the goals-based planning launch at Canada Life. Duncan Robinson is an experienced financial professional whom I've known through my affiliation with Freedom 55 and Canada Life. I'll ask those of you in the chat to guess his age, but let's just say I hope to be as fit as him later in life. Starting us off today, we've got Dr. Sam Sivarajan. He brings, I would say, like a fresh and engaging twist to wealth management consulting. He built a wealth management business managing $80 billion in assets. He's worked as an investment banker, advising on $40 billion M&A deals. He's armed with a doctorate in behavioral science. And so he combines really a deep understanding of human behavior with practical business experience that provide clients with strategic, impactful solutions. He's also an adventurer at heart. I think he was just in Europe and was biking through there, but he's also climbed mountains, run marathons, and written books, mostly on investing and decision-making. And I think his adventures likely inspired some of that writing. So without further ado, Sam, welcome to the event, and thank you for being here.
Brandon, thank you. Pleasure to be here and to share the stage with you and Duncan. So let me tell you a story. Anna is a 6-year-old girl. Anna's mother is working hard, but since she had her hours cut, the two have been going to bed hungry every night. Until Anna's mother finds more work, they can't afford enough food. Now, let me give you a statistic. 4.4 million Canadians live in poverty and can't afford enough food. So which moves you more, motivates you to act and to help? The story or the statistic? Joseph Stalin once said that the death of one man is a tragedy. The death of millions is a statistic. What he meant is that people find stories more powerful than statistics. So why is storytelling so powerful? It's because our brains are wired to connect with stories. So when we hear a story, our brains react as if we are a part of it. And this is because of mirror neurons, which help us empathize and relate to others. These neurons in our brains fire not only when we perform an action, but also when we observe other people performing it. So what this means is this neural coupling means that when we hear a story, it's almost like we are experiencing it ourselves. And stories make us feel emotions. And believe it or not, it is the emotions that actually help us make decisions. Stories help us understand and remember complex information. Think about the last time you heard a great story. I bet that you remember those details vividly to this day. And that is because stories engage more parts of our brain and more of our senses than just data alone. In my days as an investment banker in England many moons ago, I saw this firsthand. Our logos and those of our client companies got us the meetings, but we won the deals by sharing stories. Our leaders shared tales of past deals, the hurdles that they faced, and the successes that they achieved. These stories helped prospective clients picture their own success through our experiences. And these stories demonstrated our expertise in a more tangible and also a more humble way. As a junior banker, I was lucky to get to work on the biggest satellite IPO in Europe. I spent months working on that deal, learning about the business and the technical side of the satellite industry. The IPO was a huge success. A few months later, we pitched to a division of Airbus that owned a large satellite business in Latin America. During that pitch, I shared the story of our previous work. I talked about the challenges we overcame and the successes we achieved. In other words, I shared the stories about how we made that European transaction successful. This positioned us as the right partner. We ended up winning that Airbus mandate because the team could see our expertise through the story I shared. I firmly believe that unlocking the future starts with the stories of our past. By sharing our stories, we empower clients to picture their own futures. They see our wins over similar challenges, and they trust that we can help them achieve the same results. Let's face it, we live in an attention economy. Every single day, we are bombarded with more than 10,000 marketing messages. We multitask and we channel surf, aimlessly in many cases, until we land on that, for example, cool Netflix show that we just have to binge watch. Why is that? Because it is the difference between shallow versus immersive experiences. Netflix gets you to binge their programs by creating a compelling, immersive experience, one that grabs and captures a multitude of senses. If we want to persuade people, we need to grab and hold their attention, move them from these shallow experiences to immersive experiences. Now, data alone isn't going to do it. Stories will. Think about it. When you hear a bunch of numbers, it's easy to tune out. In fact, your eyes probably glaze over. But when you hear a story, you perk up. You get interested. You sit up in your chair. You want to know what happens next. That's because stories make our brains sync with the storyteller. We feel the story as if we were living it. And that is why sharing stories is so persuasive. In fact, studies show that people remember stories up to 22 times more than facts alone. That is powerful. It means that if you want to make an impact, if you want people to remember your message and then act on it, you need to tell stories. Some years ago, I was building our ultra-high net worth business in Canada. Now, we knew that credentials and capabilities alone wasn't going to win clients. Everyone can talk about their credentials and capabilities. Some of them even earned. We needed to connect on a deeper level. We had to show that we understood our clients' challenges and that we could deliver the right solutions. In one early case, we were one of 4 firms invited to pitch to one of Canada's wealthiest families. We got to pick the order, and I chose to go last. This was our chance to impress, and we knew that we had only one shot. Now, we practiced and prepared meticulously, but we didn't have enough information to create a truly personalized proposal. But it was a chicken and egg situation. We realized that we needed to first earn the right to truly understand their problems. I mean, they weren't going to open up on our first meeting without us convincing them that we were worthy of being given inside information. So we brought 2 decks. The first contained our credentials and capabilities. The second had stories, case studies of similar clients. These case studies highlighted top challenges faced by other wealthy families and how we helped solve them. When we began our pitch, we told the family that we didn't need to walk through our credentials. They already knew our capabilities, otherwise we wouldn't have been invited. I told them that if they had trouble sleeping, they could flip through our credentials deck, and that got a smile. We spent the meeting focused on the second deck, what we had thought might be their pain points, and how we might be able to help. By sharing relevant case studies, we shared stories of overcoming obstacles and delivering success. This approach resonated with them because they could see themselves in those stories. They could visualize us solving their problems. To leave a lasting mark, we connected on a personal level, zeroing in on their problems and how we could solve them. This storytelling approach not only won us the client, but it also forged long-term trust. Through our stories, they saw how we delivered success in the past, and they believed that we could deliver it for them in the future. Stories are powerful because they are about people. They're about experiences, challenges, and triumphs. They make abstract concepts real and relatable. And in our business, that is critical. Clients don't just want to see numbers. They want to know that you understand their situation, that you have true empathy for their pain, and that you can really help them achieve their goals. When we tell stories or share stories, we show empathy. We show that we understand their pain points and that we have the experience to help. This builds trust. It makes clients feel heard and understood. And that's the foundation of any strong relationship. When we listen to a story, our brains release oxytocin, a hormone that promotes connection and empathy. This makes us more likely to trust and remember the information that we hear or see. And it's no wonder that great leaders and marketers use stories to persuade and inspire. We are no longer in the age of knowledge. Any language model or AI can give anyone the knowledge that they seek. So knowledge is no longer a competitive advantage. We are now in the age of wisdom, applying the right knowledge at the right time in the right way. And especially in technical and high-risk areas like law, medicine, or financial advice, data alone isn't going to be enough to persuade. It is storytelling that shows the listener how knowledge applies in this context for this person. Storytelling is a powerful tool that I believe financial advisors have to use. It bridges the gap between data and emotion, the abstract and the tangible, theory and practice. It allows us to connect with clients on a deeper, more meaningful level. Now, statistics will always be important, but it's the stories that we tell and share that build the trust and inspire action. In a world that is overflowing with information, sharing compelling stories sets you apart. It turns abstract numbers into relatable experiences, and it makes your messages stick. As we are looking to help clients navigate this changing world, we need to use the power of storytelling to drive success, build trust, and make a real impact. Turn data into stories that move people and inspire action. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. That was incredible. What stood out to me was that stories actually resonate 22 times more than data, because you see so many advisors trying to talk about the markets and about the economic climate, when in reality, a lot of that stuff goes in one ear out the other. So thank you very much for sharing your perspective. And for those of you that are active on LinkedIn, I encourage you to follow Sam. He shares a lot of relevant stories for our industry, and I've learned a lot from engaging with his content. Next up, we've got Duncan Robinson. Duncan is a third generation financial specialist specializing with generational wealth transfer and legacy building. He built off his father and grandfather's wealth of financial management knowledge, and that allowed him to forge his career path by integrating strategies and solutions from really traditional and modern approaches. He rose to prominence in the insurance industry by working with prominent families with complex family wealth landscapes and different, sometimes competing priorities and needs. Duncan's patience and persistence in providing the best solutions for clients have always been seen as frank, straightforward, and sincere. Duncan's passionate about advocating for clients, both the current generation business owners and their successors, on their wealth transfer between multiple generations. Duncan's also a highly driven triathlete, motivational speaker, and industry influencer who's written 2 books on the importance of planning. So, Duncan, thank you very much for joining us today. Looking forward to hearing your story a bit further.
Thank you very much, Brandon. Appreciate the intro, and Sam, appreciate the knowledge behind the statistics. I have three numbers to start with, and it's 18, 44, and 55. And at the age of 18, I never really, our family had a real impact on us that has really carried me through 55 years later. So I was 18, 55 years later. So Brandon said, you can guess my age. That's my age, 73. And the third number is 44. 44 is when I got into the life insurance, and as I describe it, the business of life. And 44, it was, I had taken 2 years off at that point to decide what next. And what next was another story that impacted our family. But at the age of 18, we had a knock on the door, and the knock on the door was a really solid friend of the family. And to deliver the news, my dad had passed away of a massive heart attack at the age of 50. So for me, at that point in time, me and my 3 brothers, time just completely slowed right down. And for my mom, because we were all baby boom kids, and mom didn't work. Mom thought at this point in time it was just the most unthinkable thing. So for me to get into the business at 44, and how do I make an impact? How do I show that I'm unique, I'm different, sharing a story? So a lot of the people that I was seeing in those early years at my age of 44, and I had a pretty good network at that point in time as well. It's that, what happens when something happens? And for us, my dad was in the insurance business, and we did have some life insurance, but she had four hungry boys at home. And, we went 18, 17, 15, and 13. And, we're just at this pivotal moment where the human capital was needed. What I was able to carry through and start part of my career was that this sudden impact. And the sudden impact when something happens within your family. So I'll try to use these open-ended questions. And what happens when something happens? If you've got mom and dad there, if you could do the planning today, what would prevent you from doing that planning? And after sharing my story and knowing that life does happen, what happens? So my big lesson, my big takeaway, and it's wasn't selling the life insurance, but it was selling like life and the loss of human capital. And so I got on this kind of mission or passion moving forward to really reinforce that we're just a heartbeat away. And the more persistence and passion you have in being this person of this commitment of telling that story. So that was at the age of 18. And, I ask everybody in the audience today, remember when you were 18? And you may not have my dad's massive heart attack story, but you've got a story. And as Sam said, when you reinforce with stories, people can identify, people can relate, and it's part of your relatability. And when you become relatable and you've got a relatability story, it sticks. And it sticks with that client, and they can see your purpose and your passion and how you deliver that story. So that was at my age of 18. I got into the business, as I said, at 44. And just after I got into the business, really it was the unthinkable for me. My son was 13 at the time, and I had just come back from the Boston Marathon, 100th running the Boston Marathon. And, there I was waiting to share the news of that whole event with Michael. But rather than that, he had been sick before I took off to Boston, but really didn't know what he had. But when I returned, we were met with the news of ALL, which is acute lymphocytic leukemia. That battle went on for 15 months of chemotherapy and radiation and steroids, knowing full well that you just think that kids are going to get better. And it was almost a year to the day that Michael was supposed to go back to school, but he said, rather, Dad, got these horrendous lower back pains going on, and rather than going to school, can we find out what's going on? Back to Children's Hospital here in Vancouver, and to have the news from the oncologist delivered that the cancer was back. And anybody who knows anything about cancer, when somebody relapses, especially children, they've already used the most aggressive protocol to battle the cancer. The oncologist said, well, we'll do what we can, but we've already used the most aggressive protocol. And just 6 weeks later, what the oncologist told us was the cancer would continue to grow, and Michael would complete his life probably in the next couple of weeks. That story still resonates with me today. I can take it second by second, and the news being delivered to us, but then us having to deliver that news to Michael. And for a 14-year-old to actually understand what was going on, and he accepted. It was one of the greatest gifts that he really delivered to me, that he said, I'm going to be okay. At this point, he was at Canuck Place at Children's Hospice here in Vancouver. And they really counsel the kids if that is the next step of their life. And Michael said, I'm going to be okay, but will you be okay? And at that point, it was so difficult to even comprehend that a child could actually die. And for me, going forward from that point, it's being able to communicate that message and it's kind of a line that I use, it's life is perfectly imperfect. That's a perfection of it. It's perfect. And everybody will have that perfectly imperfect moments along their lives as we counsel clients. And, they may be in their young family, 30s to 40s, or that business owner in their 40s to 50s to 60s. And as you cross over that 6th decade into your 70s and 80s, time is shrinking. Time is shrinking, and there's less runway of life, if you will, left. So I share that story, both my dad's story and Michael's story. And Michael only had 14 years. And, if you sit back and have that conversation with your client, what really is the purpose of life insurance? It's not life insurance, it's about life. We don't sell life insurance, do we? We sell the outcome of life insurance, whether it was with my mom and the life insurance she had in place, but eventually she had to go back to work. For Michael, we had a little bit of life insurance on him, but it's losing a child at the age of 14 and having to carry on. I'm a huge believer in children's life insurance. The big lesson, the big lesson or takeaway that I take away from, Michael passing on is that just life happens. We had no cancer in our family. And, I've over the course of this past summer, I've probably had 4 other clients. The oldest one was mid-70s, and he had just sold his business, and life was completely ahead of him. And he passed away from a stroke, complicated by cancer. And then 3 other close friends who were clients. So, going back to my kind of what I refer to as a foundational line, life is perfectly imperfect. That's the perfection of it. Can't change it. It'll happen. So your story, if you've been in this business for any period of time, you're going to have that story. But as you go face to face with your clients, as you sit on the telephone with your clients, does that purpose and passion and drive and determination and energy and enthusiasm come through in what you do? How you communicate through social media has a big impact as well. And it's seeing the passion that each and every one of us has out there and how we deliver our message, delivering it with purpose, passion, that commitment, your vulnerability and your authenticity, being actually sharing that story and being vulnerable, be completely open to the client. As Sam said, those wealthy clients, they actually wanted to hear stories, how committed you are and how authentic you are. That client is the center of your universe through your story. When you're able to deliver that story with purpose and passion and commitment, and vulnerability, and being completely authentic, all of a sudden, you don't sell life insurance. You're the closest friend to that family when something does happen, because life finishes, life does complete. If you can take all the information, all the stats, everything in, and just roll it into, what that reality is, what actuality is, what the pure truth is, and build that case and become that real person, that person with vulnerability, authenticity. All of a sudden, you're relatable. You have this relatable authenticity person in you, and they can see that realness in you. And all of a sudden, you cross over that tipping point that says, I want to work with you because you care. You care about my family. This is what it's really my prescription. I call it my 4 C's. I took years ago, strategic coach with Dan Sullivan, and it's something really simple, but it resonates at whatever part of your life you're in. But if you're in the business of life, the life insurance business, find your story. Find your story that you can capsule up into a couple of minutes, that you can really deliver how committed you are to this business. Find the courage to deliver that message. Don't talk about term insurance or par or universal life. I mean, that's irrelevant when something happens to somebody. Find the courage to deliver your story. You may need to find new capabilities and deliver new capabilities on the ability to deliver that message, because you will get out of your comfort zone. But if you go through commitment, courage, developing new capabilities, you raise your level of confidence, and all of a sudden that client, that business owner, that best friend sees a new level of confidence and commitment and courage and new capabilities in you. And all of a sudden, you're not a life insurance person. You're somebody who really cares about their family. I truly believe that, you know, that we should all be kind of a role model to our health. Brandon said earlier, guess the guy's age. Well, I'll be 73 this year, and I've been completely committed to health, because without health, all the wealth that we're building for our clients is irrelevant. You know, we could pick, you know, any number of people. Steve Jobs always comes to mind quickly. All the money in the world, but he had no health and passed away early. If we become that role model of being that healthy, vibrant, energetic person, all of a sudden they will buy into you even more. And it could be that separating or that tipping point. All of a sudden somebody wants to deal with somebody who was that role model, who was a wealth advisor, a life insurance, but all of a sudden they're being driven by this healthy, energetic, excitable person who is all of a sudden now completely relatable. This is the story of Michael.
For all the wisdom of a lifetime, no one can ever tell. But whatever road you choose, I'm right behind you, win or lose, forever young, forever young.
Those images still resonate with me today, even though it's been 27 years since Michael passed away. And it's those images that you can image on your client through your story and becoming really, really relatable. Brandon, thank you very much for the opportunity today. And thank you everybody for listening in.
Wow. Thank you, Duncan. I had my camera off, luckily, but I teared up a bit because, yeah, you're keeping your son's memory alive in such an impactful way. Thank you for sharing. Ultimately, we entered this business because, you know, perhaps we needed a career or we were passionate about our community, but to have so much conviction to pass on through stories like that, Duncan, wow. I hope all of us on the call can not necessarily go through such terrible experience, but be able to turn such a terrible experience into such an uplifting message to the world. So thank you, Duncan.
Yes, I appreciate it, Brandon. I mean, it's, as I said, life is perfectly imperfect. That's the perfection of it. You know, I'm sure everybody out there has kids or grandchildren or nieces or nephews, and you just can't ever imagine something happening. But, you know, eventually something happens to each and every one of us. And, you know, we're in the fortunate business being able to protect that life.
My story, I don't think will be as impactful as that, Duncan, but I do have a lot to learn. But I do want to share some context from my own practice, as I think it can be relevant for how advisors can tie in technology into sharing their story. I run a wealth and insurance practice here in Vancouver. I started in the business just shy of 10 years ago. And while I built the practice from scratch, I was able to learn from many experienced advisors along the way that helped guide me in my journey. But in hindsight, the stories that I borrowed and lived through and then shared through client meetings, those ultimately helped lead me to where I am today. So I'm going to walk through how I weave storytelling into my own practice and then how technology helps. Storytelling plays a critical role in all of our businesses. I use it at various stages to strengthen the connection with clients and to make information more relatable. This is really the process that I take with clients, and I'll kind of walk through where I weave stories in throughout the process. Digitally, clients can see on my website that I work with a lot of technology people, business owners, professionals, and my content strategy aligns with that. And while that may not necessarily cast a wide net, it ensures that I help stand out in a crowded market full of financial advisors. We recently redid this site thanks to a bit of a branding exercise with marketing expert Natalie Hales. She's also someone else I would suggest folks follow on LinkedIn if you're considering how to brand yourself online. Now, when I receive a referral from an accountant or an existing client, I insist they fill out an introductory questionnaire through AdvisorFlow so that I have basic information about the prospect situation. This is similar to how you might fill out a form before you visit the doctor's office. Then when I have that first meeting, I know how to tailor the conversation and which stories to bring up. Did they check off estate planning, retirement planning, or budgeting? My closing ratio with prospects is much higher with those who've completed a survey than those who don't. And frankly, that's because if they're more engaged in the process and they're willing to do a little bit of work up front, that's generally a good sign. For example, if clients checked off estate planning, I generally will discuss how my father passed away with no will and no insurance. This was a couple of years ago, and I'm vulnerable with prospects because it negatively impacted my family. And I'm passionate about helping others avoid that type of situation in their lives. At the end of an introductory meeting, if clients are ready to proceed, I'll send through a letter of engagement by DocuSign and collect a planning fee. Once that's signed, I then send through the financial overview through AdvisorFlow to get a full view of the client's situation, net worth, cash flow, necessary documents in order to build the financial plan. During the fact-finding process, I've got a few stories that I regularly use. For example, to illustrate the benefit of disability insurance, I'll use job A, job B, for those of you that know that. I'll explain the benefit of paying yourself first. I share about the psychological concept that I learned in the Freedom 55 training, known as the recommendation circles, which shows how various products can align with goals. Ultimately, though, if I've heard clients correctly, my recommendation is essentially a story about their situation. I'm confirming everything that I've heard through fact-finding and through the information they've shared with me in the financial security report. And then my recommendations, how they're going to align with their stated objectives. The education and insight that goes along with that strategy I propose, oftentimes I'm using personal stories to highlight the relevance and potential impact of these recommendations. And I found that the longer I'm in business, the more relatable I become because I simply have more stories to share. I've had clients claim, I've had family situations occur. I borrowed stories when I was young because I didn't have a ton of stories, but over time I've learned more, and that's allowed me to better position solutions for clients. Now, with implementation, I generally gather more info from clients through AdvisorFlow, such as a risk survey for investments or an insurance needs analysis, if we haven't gathered that information already, or an identity verification survey. Technology will help streamline the data and file collection process, but it never replaces the human interaction. And that is the crux of why we're in this business. Stories allow me to bridge the gap and engage with clients on a deeper level, just as Duncan does, although I definitely have more to learn. Successful advisors are consistently evaluating how they can elevate their client experience. Blaming dealer processes or insurance companies is not the solution, but we have the power to work together and evolve our practices. Just a quick coming soon for AdvisorFlow, we've got a a client portal coming out soon that will incentivize clients to proactively submit info to their advisor. And then before end of year, we'll also be launching our first AI feature, and we look forward to hearing your feedback on that. I'll now welcome Sam and Duncan back, and I also hope that folks can ask questions via Q&A. I've got a couple questions that have come in that I'll jump to first. So first question, this question is geared towards Duncan. Duncan, how do you balance maintaining privacy related to personal events with the potential for impact in a client conversation?
I'm an open book. I'm really an open book. And, as I said, vulnerability and authenticity. I actually learned that through public speaking. And I started doing Toastmasters about 15 years ago. And the sign of a really good speech is starting with a story. Nobody wants to hear about statistics or this or that. They want to engage into you. So I learned that when you deliver a message, and Toastmasters is an example, just quickly, it's, you would be asked to get up and deliver a 2-minute speech. And so you'd start with a story that resonated, whatever that topic was, but to be open and honest about, where you, just back up a sec here. The more honest you could be with the audience and connecting, not with the whole audience, but with each person in the audience, all of a sudden there's a connection. And if you opened up that vulnerability and authenticity, as we do with our clients, for me, I'm just completely open. And so if they ask me a question, I'm going to be open and honest, because that gives you and builds that trust quotient even deeper. So if you can build your trust quotient by being authentic and vulnerable and just that open book, then you go way to the top of the list. I think Sam may agree with that as well.
So I agree with that wholeheartedly. I might add, a slightly different take on it. I think being authentic and vulnerable is always important. And I think if you're being asked, I think you have to be authentic and vulnerable. I think that part of the challenge that we have as financial advisors is that we can come across almost as, teachers and school marms and lecturers, etc. So that we need to kind of be able to share the fact that what we're telling them, to save or to face mortality or whatever, like that, be open and clear with what our challenges are in that area and how we've managed to overcome. That's the authentic and vulnerable part that you talk about. Look, I think my own take is I think everybody's got their own level of comfort, and that evolves over time. I think, like, for me, that has evolved. I had a boss who told me about 20 years ago that everyone has 3 personas. Okay, they have their public persona, they have their private persona, and then they have their really private persona. Okay, and the challenge is that to share parts of that you feel comfortable. I think you can be authentic and vulnerable. I think if you'd known me 25 years ago, the only persona that was there outside of my family and friends is the public. I think now I'm comfortable on sharing private. I've not yet, graduated or matured to that point where it's the, really, really private stage yet, but that might come. And I think maybe to the person that asked the question, the answer that I would say is that this is a journey, that everybody has to make it themselves and find their own level of comfort of where it's going to be, because it comes back down to what you said, Duncan, that is, you have to be authentic and vulnerable, and so everybody has to choose their flavor of those 2 ingredients that they're comfortable with.
Yeah, very fulsome answer. And I guess ultimately people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And if you're sharing personal stories, that's going to build trust a heck of a lot faster than a lot of facts and figures. Okay, we've got another question that's come in here. As you know, the average age in this business is over 50. How do you think someone in their 20s are able to break into this industry as clients perhaps don't take younger advisors seriously? How do you reckon one is to handle this battle?
I think, when I got in the business at 44, I had a little bit of a network, but like, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have any of that. And today, you've got, any number of platforms that, you can, personify yourself and put yourself out there. But, it's, if you're a 20-year-old, you're at the, because your costs are completely, there's really no cost to live at 20. You may still be living at home, but, all of a sudden you can start the process with those clients that are looking for guidance. There's coming out of high school or university, there's very little financial information provided for that 20-year-old. So if you're coming into this business now, whether it's protecting a family or growing wealth, you have time on your side. And it's one of the greatest times. It's one of the greatest careers ever. We talk about the tsunami, the wealth transfer. I mean, there's just so many things that a 20-something can do now, and time is completely on your side.
So I might add one thing on that. So I think, Duncan is right. Look, I think they can borrow stories, as you did, Brandon. I think that's an element. And I think that the importance is, look, experience will come with time. I think the skills or that empathy of listening and asking questions that show that you care, I don't think that comes with, like, you don't have to be 60 years old to be able to show that empathy. You can show it at 25 if you truly are listening. Somebody said, and I love this turn of phrase, that, there's 3 levels of listening, right? There's listening to respond, there's listening to hear, and there's listening to understand. And I don't think that anybody, you don't need to have been in the industry for that long to listen to understand. If you can make your clients feel understood, I think it doesn't matter whether you're 22 or you're 62.
Yeah, I agree with that completely, because I didn't know very much in my mid-20s, and I didn't have a whole lot of great stories. But because I was thoughtful in my approach and asking questions, and I truly cared about the clients I spoke with, 99% of them are still clients today. And they've grown their net worth, and they trust me more because I was working with them when they didn't have a high net worth. So yeah, I completely agree. Next question we have is for Sam. Some people are more analytical and may resonate better with statistics and numbers. Some people are more emotion driven and more receptive to stories. Do you always have a quick assessment of your audience before deciding your approach?
I think it's a great question. And I think the short answer is yes. And I think it goes back to anything that we do. There isn't a cookie cutter approach. Every client that we have, we need to understand what is going to work for them and how we need to engage and communicate with them. And to some extent, I think as a good advisor, we're sort of chameleons. We need to be able to, and it's not being inauthentic. It's still kind of focusing on that element of the client that you have a connection with, that you can resonate. I wouldn't say that, being, it's either or. I think if you've got an engineer, for example, as a client, I think you're going to have to be sure that you're using statistics. You can't just tell stories, okay? If it's somebody that is, I don't know, lived a colorful life and traveled, etc., you probably want to tell stories. I think you want to do an assessment. And I think in almost all situations, you're going to want to use a blend. I think the real point is about where is the emphasis? Are you focusing on, statistics because that's the way the person thinks? Or are you focusing with stories? I think there is no formula that you say, tell a story, then give a statistic, and then tell a story, and then give a statistic. I think it's an art. And I think this comes again, as you and Duncan have alluded to, you get experience that figures out that, in this case, this is right. But I think a short answer would be, yes, you do sort of assess with all of the fact finding, and every advisor does it anyways. I mean, we always sit there and make the assessment that this type of client is going to be focusing on this type of information and in this type of delivery. And I think this is just, accentuating that.
And you can get a really good understanding, before you even see that client, depending upon who the client is, but you can Google, and get, whether they're on LinkedIn or, there's so much information out there now on anybody, you're going to see. So you can get a really good assessment and go in with plan A, plan B, and just, power of being a really good advisor is the ability to listen and understand. And, when you can, we've all heard it, you got two ears and one mouth. Just listen. If, I can remember in the early days, I would starting out with business owners and just ask them how they got started in this business. And, you might have had a half-hour meeting, but they're still going on 45 minutes later because it's their baby, and that's the emotional connection, but it's the ability to listen, hear, and understand what they really want and what, where they want to start.
Next question I have is for Duncan. It's tell us about and you don't have to answer this right away because I'm going to put a poll up in just a sec for our next event, so I hope everyone can engage in that. But the question is, can you tell us about a larger case that you worked on over the years and how storytelling tied into that case, and also how long it took you from the moment you found the opportunity to when you closed it?
Probably took 4 years, and it was, I kind of targeted this client. He had been connected to a industry that I was familiar with, and just started with him and asking him about what retirement would look like, selling his business, how he was going to, just a lot of open-ended questions that started him thinking. And he had never, thought about using corporate life insurance with bank financing over the next, 8 to 10 years, and extrapolating and purifying cash from the company. And so we ended up, over the years, getting closer for him to understand what that all meant. But then he said, you got to go talk to my accountant. So, and what I try and do is always, find out who the accountant is first, and and sit down and build a relationship with that accountant. Sat down, built a relationship with the accountant. I said, okay, we're, fast forward 4 years later, and we got a valuation of the business and the valuation of what it might be worth 10 years later, and said, why don't we try and strip out about a third of that value, because everything else was paid for. And what we were trying to do was build CDA credits, capital dividend account credits for future taxation and generational planning at the same time. Ended up, we ended up doing 2 policies on his 2 young boys who were going to transfer into the business, policy on his wife, policy on him, and then a joint last survivor. Combined premium was 1.3 million. 1.3 million bank financing. We've run into some hurdles over the years on, the last couple of years on interest rates, but he uses what's called banker's acceptance. So banker's acceptance is slightly lower rate, but I said, even with current interest rate environment, it's still a strong deduction. It's still a good deduction versus paying, basically, if you want to take $1 out of the corporation, dividend tax was at 30%. So he got it. And he, in the end, he said, I wish I had done this sooner. I wish I'd have done this sooner. Nobody really ever talked to me about this stuff. But he was connected to a charity that I was connected with. There was some relatability to that. It resonated with him. I had done some public speaking at some galas as well. He saw me, and he just saw me, as I said earlier, being completely open book, authentic and vulnerable, and he bought in. And, so along with him has come a bunch of referrals as well, not to the 1.3, but, mid 6-figure premium. So, just if, I done the Ironman 5 times. What I learned with the Ironman is there's going to be some, dark moments along that journey, and there's been a whole bunch of dark moments. But if you can continue to be persistent and just continue driving forward, seeing that client until they really give you an absolute no, it's still a yes. It's still a yes. And it's just there's a acronym WAG, and WAG is Wild Awesome Goals. Just write down those 5 top clients, those wild awesome goals, and unless you ask, they don't know. And be that person who can share that story, be that person who is authentic and that open book, and you just never know where that'll go.
Thanks, Duncan. Yeah, I haven't come across big cases like that, but hopefully someday. Now we are out of time. So I first off just want to thank both of you for joining us today and sharing your time and expertise. I've certainly learned a lot. Now for our attendees on the line, I just would like Sam and Duncan to give a quick farewell or final parting note before we say goodbye. So hopefully you can stick around for that. So Sam, please take it away.
No, look, it's been great to share the stage/podium with you and Duncan. I learned a lot too, and I think the lesson is that the client, for me, the takeaway and what I would leave your audience with is that your clients need you. Bring your whole self, your whole authentic and vulnerable self, and let the magic happen.
Thank you, Sam, and thanks, Brandon. We're in a powerful, powerful business, and we really don't realize, the power of us, the power of, it's like in my book of business, over the next 20 years, be close to $1 billion through death benefits. It'll find its way back into the money system. And you can compound that $1 billion, because that's only about 1/3 of what, the insurance value is. There's another 2/3 that in real estate and all types of other assets. So close to $3 billion. So that 20-something who asked that question, we're in such a powerful business, and you have no idea the impact that we can make. But the impact that we can make if life happens, and take my phrase, you can steal it if you like, life is perfectly imperfect. That's the perfection of it. It can't change it. That's a perfection of it. And go forward and continue to make impact in your own practices.
Beautiful message. Well, thanks everyone again for joining. Thank you, Sam and Duncan. We will send the recording out afterwards, and we'll hopefully see you at one of our events in the future. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Duncan.